We're going to just dive right into and get going today. Just a reminder, everyone, please turn off your cell phones, turn your ringers down for our presenters, give them that courtesy. Before going, I want to remind everyone of next year's ABC conference. It's scheduled for September 25th through the 27th at the Omni Seaport Hotel in Boston. Hopefully we'll get back to the numbers that we had in Montreal and Miami a couple of years ago. We can look forward to that. Also, would like to remind you or ask you to please follow the ABC on LinkedIn and Twitter. It's a great way to keep connected to your ABC colleagues and to stay up to date on conference updates. I'd like to welcome to the stage our first speakers for the day. It's a panel discussion beginning with Michael Harrington of Lockheed Martin, Patton Klein of Marsh, Jeff Breling of Boeing, and Charles Thornton of Northrop Grumman. Gentlemen, would you like to come up, please? If you may recall Michael's presentation from 2019, and this is an update on ensuring the NASA space program. Thank you, gentlemen.
Hear me? Oh, look at that, the voice. Yeah, so a few years ago, we stood before you with an idea. We were, can you turn that down? Thank you. We had this concept and we had a problem of ensuring the space program. The problems were manifold. We had a stacking of limits issue for the insurers. We had exposure of all of our other products coverage if we ever had a limits loss for all of the prime contractors. And we were really faced with probably having a situation where coverage might not exist for the space program if we didn't take any action. So we took action, and I just want to take a moment to thank all the people who made this happen. No one person does this sort of thing. We had great support from the insurance brokerage community, from the underwriting community, from risk managers, from companies that typically compete with one another to put together a program that is going to sustain the space program deep into the future. It took us about 3 years to get it all finished. And last time we stood on the stage, it was the last meeting of the day. We were after John Doyle. Everybody was running for the door. So I'm not sure who got to hear too much about it. So Patton will talk about the details of the program in a minute. But all 6 prime contractors, Global Aerospace, Marsh, contributed to the development of this. And I think it was a great program. Broad-based insurance, 13 underwriters. We had a few underwriters that didn't quite understand the program. We hope to see them get engaged in the future. And it really is a new thing. It's the first joint program that I'm aware of that the market's ever seen or had. So with that, Patton, you want to talk a little bit about the program?
Thanks, Michael. So we just wanted to talk about kind of broadly why this program was set up, and what we were trying to create is really a win-win, not only with underwriters and clients, particularly the prime contractors here, but really also the U.S. government. So in creating this, what we did in creating one policy is really, by creating a standalone policy, we basically put together one limit. So we addressed the stacking of limits issue, which Michael just addressed, and we'll address in a little bit more detail later. But that was a big concern the underwriters brought to us with this rocket. It's the largest rocket that's ever been developed. And so they didn't want multiple limits applying during the launch phase of the vehicle. Creating this single policy basically created a wraparound for all the prime contractors in NASA, and it also insulated the main APL programs of all of the prime contractors. And that's obviously important because these prime contractors, they're not only in the business of creating launch vehicles or creating different space components, but they're also in the business of aviation and other things. And they wanted to make sure that those programs were protected. We also, in creating this, were able to put together a common cross waiver that was accepted by NASA, which was very important. Not only to the primes, but also to subcontractors and everyone else in the contract chain. And then 85804 indemnity was granted by NASA for putting this policy together. And in the event of a claim, we wanted to make sure that we were encouraging everyone to work together with the U.S. government to resolve any type of issue that may arise in the future. And then also minimize inter-party litigation. The last thing we wanted is some claim that created inter-party litigation amongst these contractors, which are supposed to really be working together to create this launch vehicle. And then, this also created additional premium in the insurance market, which was seen as a big benefit, particularly by the underwriting community.
So we'll talk just for a minute about 85804. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but it's a statute that the government has that allows the government to indemnify and protect the balance sheets of corporations above available insurance. In the former state, a couple problems. NASA had a policy letter that said that they were not going to grant 85804 indemnity for anybody. So that was a big problem we had to overcome. And that started with meetings with NASA, which were rather interesting. I mean, these are the best rocket scientists in the world, but they really had no idea of how insurance worked. They thought a certificate of insurance was a policy, things like that. We had to explain all of that to them. And it took quite a while. I will say once they began to understand all the concepts, then they were agreeable to considering 85804. But they didn't want to do it across 5 different primes. So what we did do is we put the statute in place above this program, and it's a very good statute because without it, it only protects for unusually hazardous risks, catastrophic loss, and above anything we could ever get in the insurance markets. This slide is just designed to show you what it looked like before and what it looks like after. So in the prior state, each one of the prime contractors had all of its limits exposed to multi-party litigation across the parties with no cross waivers. In the current state, we have a single policy, as Patton said, insulates the prime policies of each contractor and has the Public Law 85804 indemnity above it. So if we had a liability claim, we could quickly and efficiently pay injured parties and then have the indemnity attach. So Patton, I think this one's you.
Sure. So this is a very top level kind of overview of the coverages. And it took us a long time to develop this policy, obviously a pretty unique situation. Global Aerospace was instrumental in helping us to draft this policy and develop it, along with a lot of the prime contractors which put in input. And I think we started with kind of a manuscript form, and then we ended up doing over 35 different iterations of the policy. So it was a long process. We had to get the policy form approved by NASA. And so it probably took us about 6 months of almost daily, weekly inputs to get the policy to where everyone was in agreement and everyone approved the policy wording. And like I said, this is just a very broad-based overview of the coverages. We've got basically premises and products liability. We've got mission liability, which really provides cover for the entire mission. So this mission, particularly the if you just take Artemis 1, it's going to go around the moon. It's going to be launched. It's going to go around the moon. It's going to come back and obviously re-enter. And that coverage grant covers the entire mission, which is a little bit unique because a lot of times in our policy wordings, we actually have launch liability as one coverage grant, in-orbit liability as a separate coverage grant. So here we kind of merged it all into one thing, which allows for a little bit more seamless cover. We've also got some coverage for voluntary settlements for the astronauts, med pay, and then we've got some more liability coverage as well. But anyway, it was a big effort, and just want to thank everyone that was involved.
I think it's Jeff.
Oh, actually.
I think you have one more.
All right. So this is just an overview of kind of the milestones that have been done to date on Artemis 1, which is the first SLS mission. The first 2 articles here have been completed. So they're at the VAB. Which is the vertical assembly building, and they're basically putting the vehicle together right now. And the hope is that the launch will occur before the end of the year. And the mission takes around a month or potentially a little bit longer. So then re-entry and recovery wouldn't be till after the first of the year. Obviously, this is a fluid schedule, so things might be delayed, and unfortunately, with a lot of space launches, things tend to move to the right, but hopefully the launch will occur sooner than later.
Jeff.
Thank you, Pat. Yeah, no problem.
Go get
My coffee.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say it's truly been an honor and a pleasure to work with these risk management titans of industry, along with the Marsh team and Global, to put this program together. I hope we can do it in the future. When Michael had called me up, he said, "Hey, do you want to go to Washington, D.C. and meet with NASA and get him to give us 804 indemnification again?" And Patton explained the insurance, and Charles came along, and all of our teams. It really did work out good, where it was a system like we talked about before, or Patton did, where you're not stacking limits, you're protecting industry, but industry still have skin in the game, while at the same time we're bringing best value for money to NASA. So that was great. Here, let's go to the next chart. But I want to thank you guys. So the Boeing SLS program update. So Boeing, Lockheed, Northrop, we've all been in the human spaceflight program since the 60s, from the Mercury, Gemini, Saturn space shuttle, and now we're moving on to the world's largest rocket, the Space Launch System. This rocket's big enough where it'll put it up over to 42 metric tons into deep lunar space. So the SLS is the first step to begin the next exploration. NASA will establish a sustainable human presence on the moon with the goal of being boots on the moon, on the ground, by 2024. It all starts with delivery services to the lunar surface from U.S. companies for scientific instruments and technology demonstrations, as well as the spaceship called the Gateway, which is a mini space station that will go around the moon. The Gateway, for the first time, with its orbits, will be able to change orbits, and it will allow people or humans to go to places on the moon they were never able to go to in the past. So SLS is critical to NASA's exploration plans at the moon and beyond. NASA designed the Space Launch System as the world's most powerful rocket for safely sending humans on missions to deep space. The first mission in 2021 will test the new spacecraft systems flying together for the first time without a crew, and the second flight is targeted for 2022 to take people for a flight around the moon. The third flight of SLS and Orion will kick off delivery of a new Gateway, which will have parts for missions flying about once per year after that. SLS will launch the Gateway system, and the Orion will be used as a tug to put the Gateway in lunar orbit. So the program like this, mission really drives design. There's a matter of how long it takes to get to the moon versus Mars and back. To get to the moon and onto Mars, we need a lot of power and lift capability. The SLS was born to do just that. It's designed and built for direct inject to deep space destinations in a single launch. The difference in distance between low Earth orbit, the space station or the shuttle, and a trip to the moon is the same relative difference between a 3-mile drive across town and a 3,000-mile trip from Los Angeles to New York. A long trip needs a rocket built to go the distance. SLS will take us all the way to the moon and back on its maiden launch. So this chart shows the team of the major, or the 6 prime contractors on SLS. So Northrop Grumman with Charles is going to get into details with a great video on the solid fuel rocket boosters. Boeing built the core stage, Teledyne. They built the launch stage adapter. Lockheed Martin built the Orion capsule and the launch abort system. The other thing that Boeing built was what actually ULA, or joint venture between Lockheed and Boeing, they built the ICPS, which is the interim cryogenic propulsion system. Sorry. So this is we call it the backbone of the SLS, really the fuel tank. second, or the picture there which shows the number 2, that's the liquid hydrogen tank. It holds 537,000 gallons. The liquid oxygen tank, the front of the core stage, holds 200,000 gallons of liquid oxygen. And you have to cool this down because these are obviously a gas, and to get in the liquid form, in order to fit in that space, you have to bring the liquid hydrogen down to negative 423 Fahrenheit. So they load this about 2-3 hours before you actually go to the launch. The back has the system for navigation, and then this rocket was built actually, instead of going vertical, is built on its side horizontally, which is a new process, but it's so big it makes it a lot easier to assemble. A lot of the parts are pre-drilled, and the Boeing team actually has a big program management office at Michoud with NASA, so we can change things as we go, and it turned out to be a pretty good process. The SLS was green run tested at Stennis Air Force Base. It burnt essentially 26 tanker trucks, semi-trucks of fuel in 8 minutes, and it was a successful green run test. Then they put it on the Pegasus barge, and now it's at the Kennedy Space Center in the vertical assembly building.
And this program was in place to cover it at that time, right?
Oh yeah, and we did bring the program back in place so it would cover that liability if there was an issue with the green run test. One thing that the program is really successful with in our contracts with NASA is that the SLS for risk of loss or damage is on NASA, and then of course third-party claims and 85804 will be protected by our policy. And this is where we're at in the process. So the last step that needs to be done at the vertical assembly building at the Kennedy Space Center is to install the Orion adapter and then the capsule itself. They've had this in the vertical assembly building on the actual moon. It's has the big tracks, and it will just drive the rocket out to the launch pad. A little bit about Artemis. So the old missions were Apollo missions. These missions are Artemis missions. Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo and the goddess of the moon in Greek mythology, the goddess of the hunt. She now personifies our path to the moon as the name of NASA's program to return astronauts to the lunar surface by 2024. When they land, Artemis astronauts will step where no human has ever been before, the moon's south pole. With her rising goal of sending humans to Mars, Artemis begins the next exploration. SLS, with its exploration upper stage, provides the capability for a near-term Mars flyby mission. It's going to take advantage of a every 15-year planetary conjunction where a human flyby can be achieved as early as 2033 with this existing technology. So now I've got a great video to give you some more detail about the actual program and how it works. And here we go.
Between 1968 and 1972, America launched 9 human missions to the moon, 6 of which successfully touched down, allowing 12 men to walk on the lunar surface. NASA's next chapter of lunar exploration, called Artemis, has the task of not just going to the moon to create a long-term human presence on and around it, but also to prepare for ever more complex human missions to Mars. In short, everything we must be able to do here, we must first do here. So, what will an Artemis mission look like? Everything is designed and tested with our most important element in mind, the astronauts. This is their deep space, human-rated spacecraft called Orion, built in 3 parts. The crew module, where up to 4 astronauts will live and work throughout the flight. The service module, with life support systems for the crew and its own engine and fuel reserves. And a launch abort system, with engines capable of pulling the crew module to safety during launch should anything go wrong. To accomplish the task of launching our crew and heavy payloads, NASA is building the Space Launch System, comprising of a cargo hold, an exploration upper stage, a massive core stage, and 2 extended solid rocket boosters. Altogether, this is the world's most powerful rocket, and it exceeds the legendary Saturn V of the Apollo era in numerous ways. Sitting on the launch pad, the entire rocket, fully fueled, weighs just over 6 million pounds, 5.2 million of which is just the fuel. Once ignited, there was no stopping what comes next. All 4 RS-25 engines and the 2 solid rocket boosters come to life, thundering our crew upwards. 2 minutes after ignition, the solid rocket boosters are spent and released. 8 minutes after launch, the core stage is depleted and separated. The upper stage fires briefly, placing Orion into a parking orbit around the Earth. Here, the crew reconfigure the spacecraft and check systems to confirm everything is ready for deep space travel.
I can't even understand.
With a go from mission control, the crew reignite the exploration upper stage engines to leave Earth entirely. The exact timing of this maneuver is critical to reach a speed that can escape Earth's gravitational pull, but also put Orion on a course that will intersect the Moon days later. Once this burn is complete, the upper stage of the SLS is jettisoned and the crew aboard Orion coast for several days toward all that awaits them at the Moon. Approaching the Moon, we see the fundamental differences between Artemis and Apollo. Instead of requiring Orion to serve as an expendable lunar command module or to carry a constrained lunar lander, the Artemis missions will take advantage of a different approach: pre-staging. Everything needed for lunar missions will be positioned in advance by commercial and international partners. This includes rovers, science experiments, and human-rated systems on the surface. But it also includes a dedicated lunar station in orbit around the Moon called Gateway. Here at this station, we can pre-stage a robust lunar lander and establish a strong communications relay. Designed with open standards, the Gateway can be expanded as new missions and partnerships develop, allowing multiple human missions on the Moon at the same time and enabling ongoing science to be conducted even between human missions. The Gateway is also capable of adjusting its orbit to allow access to every part of the Moon, something the Apollo missions could not do. But the real key in this approach is placing Gateway in a unique halo orbit to perfect the maneuvers needed for Mars missions. And with the growing list of commercial and international opportunities, Gateway is the ideal hub between Earth and all that lies beyond. Returning to our crew as they approach Gateway, the Orion must match the elliptical orbit of the station in order to successfully dock. Once on board, pre-selected crew members transfer to the lunar lander, while those assigned to Gateway remain on station. The lunar lander system itself is built for 3 unique steps: descending from the halo orbit of Gateway down to a low lunar orbit, descending from low lunar orbit to the surface, and once the lunar mission is complete, launching from the surface of the Moon and ascending all the way back to the orbiting Gateway. Once back aboard the Orion spacecraft and undocked from Gateway, the crew fire their engine once to break out of the halo orbit, and once again to sling the spacecraft around the Moon, placing it on a multi-day trajectory back towards Earth. As they near the end of this journey, the service module is released, and the crew module is oriented heat shield first. Entering Earth's atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour, the friction of air slows Orion considerably, while also subjecting it to temperatures of 5,000 degrees. With the Orion now at just 300 miles per hour, a series of parachutes uniquely tested and produced for this moment deploy, decelerating the craft to just 20 miles per hour for splashdown. With each successful mission, Artemis ushers in the next wave of men and women to explore our Moon and prove that together we were ready to go beyond.
How cool is that? I mean, I'm amazed that I get to be a part of that kind of a program, and I'm just so thankful. I was born in 1967. I remember when probably the last Apollo mission was returning in 1972 or 73. I was a kid watching it on TV, and I've been inspired about it ever since, and I'm just so damn lucky I get to work at a company that continues the mission. So my name is Charles Thornton. I work at Northrop Grumman. I've been there for 18 years, do a number of different satellite and launch vehicle products, but this is by far one of the coolest ones, and working collaboratively with these guys to make a first insurance type program like this is an honor and a privilege. And I got to give a shout out to Global Aerospace and Akiko Hama in particular for carrying a lot of the water, the underwriting water, to make this happen. There's an awful lot of back and forth, a lot of decisions made, and she was an integral part of that. So I'm going to talk about smoke and fire, and remember, I'm talking about boosters, and the boosters are completed with their job in less time than it's going to take me to talk about the boosters, right? 2 minutes versus whatever I'm going to talk for. The boosters are made up of 5 different sections. These are essentially recycled space shuttle boosters. Only the space shuttle used 4 segments, so this uses a 5th segment, making it 20% larger with 20% more thrust than the space shuttle boosters. They weigh about 1.3 million pounds apiece, but they put out 3.6 million pounds of thrust, so it's pretty remarkable. On the front end, we have the forward assembly. That's where the avionics are kept, and we have a forward segment 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the rear with a nozzle that does gimbal. It provides about 8 degrees of gimbling thrust vectoring. And if you look real closely on the back end at the aft assembly, you can see that there's some through bolts at like the 6 o'clock position, and again at like the 9 o'clock position that faces us. These are the through bolts, and there's 8 of them in total, 4 on each booster. This is the entire rocket assembly sits on the boosters, and so it needs to be held. This is the hold down bolts, and those are the hold down bolts. They go through those little holes there, and they detonate at ignition. But you know what? If a couple of those fail to detonate, I'm pretty sure this thing is leaving the pad anyway. And that actually did happen on the shuttle a couple of times. There's another picture here. When it's fully assembled, it's 177 feet tall. It's 12 feet wide, these boosters are. And they weigh, well, okay, I said 1.6 million pounds apiece. And guess what those are? Yeah, they're blue whales. I don't know. I didn't know either. I had to ask. What's the picture for? They weigh as much as 4 blue whales. So that's pretty heavy. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to say, actually, let me back up. Unlike a bottle rocket that gets lit from underneath, boosters get lit from the top. The igniter is at the forward end of segment number 1. So just remember that when I show you a video at the conclusion, and you're going to see how the ignition process sweeps down and goes through the barrel of this of the booster. Wrong way. All right, this is just a picture that we wanted to take. There's nothing really to say about it except here they are assembled fully in the vehicle assembly building. It was just a great snapshot. So we wanted it for the company, and I wanted you to see it. I think they look majestic. So we'll walk you through how we make a booster. Let's start with the cases. I said these are recycled shuttle program. Shuttle program used steel cases, and we're going to use these same steel cases all over again for the first few SLS missions. Now, future SLS missions are going to have carbon fiber winding, newer segments. These are not going to be reusable. They're going to be expendable on every launch. So we're going to use pretty much the rest of the stock we have from the shuttle program and reuse them on SLS. Like I said before, they're about 12 feet wide, they're about 30 feet tall. And what we do with these cases is we line them with about 4 centimeters of a rubber insulator on the inside. So that middle picture is, you can see a worker. Remember the Science Channel, how it's made? A worker applies the rubber coating on the inside as it revolves around the worker. And he lays on the rubber, and there's a couple of workers working on each side. And then comes the exciting part. It's the mix and cast. So everybody has a KitchenAid mixer at home on the counter, and they make a cake or some cookie, and they make a cookie dough. Same concept, only our KitchenAid is 600 gallons. And what we're mixing together is a little bit of ammonium perchlorate, because that's our oxidizer. And actually, it's a lot of that. And some aluminum, because that's the fuel. And we need a little bit of something to bind it all together, so we put a rubbery compound in there. And finally, some iron oxide to control the burn rate. If you put in a little bit more, burns a little faster, put a little bit less, burns a little slower. And then in the secret sauce is how we control the burn. So you can control the burn a little bit with the amount of iron oxide you're putting into that batter. But what we're also doing is putting a mandrel down into the middle of a segment before we begin the pour. Think to yourself, and I couldn't find a good picture of this, a mandrel that has, or a pole that has an 11-point star to it. So just a star with 11 points inserted down as a long tube in the middle of the segment. That gives, after you're done pouring, it gives the shape inside. It's an 11-point star. What's that for is you got more surface area to burn at the beginning of the launch. That's really important. That's when you need the most thrust. That's when it weighs the most. You need as much thrust as you can possibly get. So you put as much surface area onto it as you possibly can that makes sense. And as it burns, those points on the star burn first and ablates away. And then by the time it's kind of a smooth circle as it's burning, you're kind of the same surface area as you had before, maybe even a little bit less. But that's a good thing, because now we're approaching max Q. And what do we happen at max Q, right? That's maximum aerodynamic pressure. We don't want as much thrust going on. And what's Jeff's engines doing and first stage? They're throttling back, because now we're going to start producing even more and more thrust. As the surface area of that hole widens more and more, it's going to be burning more and more fuel as it goes, and so it's producing more and more thrust towards the end of its mission. All right, enough about that. We're going to be mixing up 45 of these batches. We start on a Monday morning. When we go to pour a segment, we start on a Monday morning, and we have 45 batches to make. So we pour, we bring in another one, we pour, we bring in another one, pour, 600 gallons each time, one segment. Pretty cool. The other steps are making a nozzle and the igniter. So you got the nozzle in the back on the far bottom picture, and then you can see the igniter bottles. Pretty big, almost as tall as the worker who's working on them right now. And a couple of pictures of them being installed in the back of the segments. And we put them all on a train, ship them all at once on one train. Yes, that's a cargo risk that we place in the market. And put them all down to Florida. And let me see. Yeah, the next page. I can't flip to the next page because a video is going to start automatically. And that'll be the last slide. The video, before I click to that, I want you to watch real carefully in the back. On the left side of the screen, you're going to see a stand, and it's got a mirror on the stand. And there's a camera that's kind of alongside the shuttle, the booster, and it's kind of pointing at the mirror, and the mirror is looking up the nozzle of the booster. So you're going to see a film of the igniter bottle doing its job and igniting, and a fireball coming right at the mirror. And if you're looking at the mirror in the beginning, you're going to see that mirror gets blasted away. It's just gone. It's toast. It burns so hot, 5,700 degrees. The sand around it turns to glass, and it burns for a couple of minutes. And at the end of the film, you're going to hear a call for CO2. Now, we don't do this in the real mission, but what we wanted to do, and you'll see a little arm go around and insert into the nozzle and put out the fire, because we want to measure the amount of insulation that was kind of ablated away during the burn, and we want to put out that fire immediately. So that's the purpose of what you're going to hear. And we conducted this test 5 different times between 2009 and I think it was 2016 was our last test. And we tested it in all kinds of different realms, right? We tested it thoroughly cold. We chilled the whole thing down to 40 degrees and tested it in the summer in Utah. How do you get that down to 40 degrees in Utah in the summer? We did it. And then in the winter, we heated another one to 90 degrees throughout, brought it outside in the winter and blasted that one. So we wanted to test the entire envelope. What are the possibilities of what kind of weather this thing is going to see? So here's one of those tests.
4, 3, 2, 1.
So much for the mirror.
Yeah.
Here comes the fire. A quarter second from ignition to full thrust.
Plus 105. Activate after mission. Plus 110. Activate forward belly. Plus 110. Activate head end CO2. Activate quench tool command forward and FCO2.
Activated, simulated, activated. T plus 145 seconds. Pad flush is off, roger.
So powerful that if you felt as if the Earth's rotation sped up just a little bit last summer, I'm just saying. That's the conclusion of my remarks.
Oops.
Sorry about that. From the ground up, as they say, right?
Well, that really concludes our presentation, and I think you can all see how passionate all of us are about our products, about the insurance program we put together. This has been a labor of love, a lot of work, but it was exciting for us, and hopefully we'll all get to see this, this wonderful rocket go up fairly soon. With that, Simon, any questions from the app? And if not, any questions from the floor, please, of anybody? Sir. It's a good question. The way we've designed it for this program is that it does flow down to all the subcontractors. Yeah, it should. You may have to still file the application, but it's all rubber stamped. And with the cross waivers, the cross waivers also are inclusive of the subcontractors. Patton, you want to supplement that in any way?
No, that's exactly right.
Okay. So it's a good program, and it's designed to be easy and effective to make sure that what we didn't want to have was any inter-party litigations and pointing of fingers, the who scratched my rocket type of arguments. We just wanted to do away with that, and we wanted to make sure that there'd be quick and efficient payments to third parties if there were any damages. And you know, the whole idea here is not to put some small subcontractor at a disadvantage. That's a good question. We haven't really contemplated that, but if you think it'd be helpful, we can consider that. Well, thanks. Any questions, Simon?
We put aside technology issues.
No, okay. I saw a hand up over here somewhere. Yes, please.
That'll make it easy on us.
Gretchen's bringing you the mic. I'll leave that one to you, Patton. You want to talk about the coverage?
Offering?
Yeah, it's just a third-party liability policy, so it doesn't cover the asset itself, and that's something that NASA is responsible for.
And the liability portion, so we launched a satellite in June 2 satellites, SpaceX and Falcon 9 rocket, and our satellites were already stacked onto the rocket, and then they had to do a test fire of the rocket, and we couldn't unstack our satellite. So you showed various stages of coverage. Would it cover that test fire phase?
Yeah, the policy is seamless, so it covers the pre-launch phase and any kind of initial testing. I mean, the testing that SpaceX does in the Falcon 9 is different from the SLS, but all those pre-launch activities that could possibly occur are covered under here.
And then are your rates dependent on who the launch provider is, or is it
Well, once again, it's a liability policy, so it's not rated the same way you would rate a first-party space policy with kind of a typical rate online for the asset value. So it's being rated more on an annual basis for an
And there
annual.
is no real launch provider in this case. It's the government, right? So this is a government launch, and I'm not sure they quite see themselves as the launch service provider in the classic way we think about that, but it's a government launch.
I think you bring up a great point. If I could just add a little bit, when you're talking about those static fires, that's just something you got to watch for when you're delivering and finding out who's got the risk of loss, and make sure you arrange that at the time of contract signing with the launch service provider who's going to be performing the static test. You definitely want your asset outside of the hazard zone. You don't want a repeat of September 1, 2016. Look it up.
Yeah, it was a
It's
bad
quite
day.
the video.
Any other questions from anybody? Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to putting SLS up in the air.